So 1-4 is measuring angles, is the majority of what we're going to cover. Okay. So first thing you need to know is how to measure angles, okay? Side note before I go any further, keep in mind this quiz is 1-1 to 1-4 tomorrow. So do you remember what we did in 1-1? That was like isometric, orthographic, and nets, right? You might want to glance over that tonight before coming to the quiz because you will have to do some orthographic on the quiz. So just be clear on that, okay? Good to go with that. Okay, measuring angles. First thing you need to know, what is an angle? And an angle is always formed by two rays that share an endpoint. Okay, so remember a ray is an endpoint with an arrow going in one direction. So you're going to have two of those that share the endpoint. That makes an angle. So for instance, if I have this setup where this is A and this is B, okay, that's ray AB. If I have ray AC that goes this way, those are my two rays. Their endpoint is what? A, okay? We call that the vertex, the vertex of our angle. So the vertex is always the point where the two rays meet. In this case, it is A. Basically what you're doing with these is in order to name an angle, there's several different ways that you can name it. I'm going to give you all the different ways. You won't have to name them for me a lot of different ways, but you do need to recognize when I'm naming an angle, okay? So for instance, if I put a number 1 here, okay, and I said, let's name this angle. One way that I could name it, one of the 4 names that I could give this angle, would be angle 1. Okay, so you can name it by the number that falls in that vertex or inside that angle. Another way you can name it is with one letter. Any guesses which one letter you could name it with, Bryce? A, right? Whatever the vertex is, you can name it with that letter. So this would be angle A, okay? And then the other 2 ways are the ways that I feel like need to get used more often, but a lot of times people are like, what are we talking about when you do that? Like they get a little confused with what it is. So be very careful with just understanding what this is. If you don't understand, ask me. But you can name an angle with 3 letters, okay? And there's 2 ways that I can name this angle with 3 letters. The key thing is your vertex has to be the middle letter. Okay, so I could call this angle BAC, or what would the other one be? CAB. Okay, here's where people get confused. When I name an angle with 3 letters, a lot of times they look at it like CAB, like those points mean something to the angle. Really what you're looking for is the middle letter is the vertex of that angle, okay? And I'll explain more as we get into naming those with 3 letters more. Today it won't be a big deal. It's just naming it with 3 letters. But eventually we get into some angle measures and numbers, and people tend to get thrown off. So when we get there, I will explain it in more depth to you. But just know, 3 letters, the vertex has to be the middle, okay? Here's why the 3 letters come into play. Because a lot of times people are like, why does it matter? Why can't I just always name it angle A? Well, let's say there's 2 angles that share the same vertex. So if this is X, Y, Z, and W, okay? If this is our setup, and I said, here's angle 1, here's angle 2, name angle 1 for me. You cannot name it angle W. Do you know why? Because there's 2 with W as their vertex, right? So when we say angle W, which one are we talking about? It might be angle 1, it might be angle 2, or it might be the 2 together, okay? So that's why you need to be able to name it with 3, because if I said angle XWY, then I know I'm talking about this angle. W is the vertex, and it goes from X to Y, okay? Can anyone name the big angle for me, the combination of the two together? Yeah, Candace. XWZ. Okay, what's the other way you could have named that one? Bella. ZWX. So either one of those combinations is great. Okay, so the big angle would be XWZ. Okay. Questions on that? Okay, this part you're going to do for me, because I know you know how. At least a majority of you know how. When they ask us to classify angles, there's 4 different types of angles that we're going to talk about, and I'm just going to draw them for you. Don't give me names yet, okay? Just watch, and I'll give you a chance to give me names in a second. 4 different types of angles we're going to talk about. Okay, can anyone tell me what that first type of angle is? Angelina. Acute. That is acute. Can anyone tell me what it means to be acute? And I don't mean adorable. Haha, Bella. Less than 90 degrees. Okay, so technically acute is between 0 and 90. That does not include 0 and 90, right? It falls between 0 and 90. So like a 32-degree angle is acute, okay? What's the second angle I have there? Kenny?
A right.
That's a right angle. And what do we know about a right angle? It is 90 degrees every time, okay? That's the only option for a 90-degree angle is a right angle, okay? Can anyone tell me the next angle there? Jordan?
Obtuse.
That is obtuse. Anyone know what makes something obtuse? Bryce? Between 90 and 180. So not including 90 and 180. I guess I should give you an X here so you know what I'm talking about, huh? So if that's X degrees, that X value has to be somewhere between 90 and 180. And then this last one I feel like is the least common one talked about. Andrew, right? Yeah. It's a straight angle. It makes a straight line. And what do you know about a straight angle? 180 degrees. Okay, so if this is our number of degrees, a straight angle will always be 180. Okay, it makes a straight line. A straight line, always 180. Okay? Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to look around this classroom, and I want you to tell someone around you where you see one of these 4 types of angles, because there's one of these angles everywhere, all over in this classroom. So that's angles. Any questions on those? Okay, then what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to use a protractor. And for the sake of the iPad, this is terrible. I can't show you very well on the iPad, so we're just not going to. So on Friday, we talked about congruent angles, congruent segments, excuse me. Today we're going to talk about congruent angles, so I'm going to show you how to mark those. So if we have congruent angles, do you remember the symbol for congruent? Jordan.
It's an equal sign with a squiggly line on top.
Equal with the squiggly, right? It's the equal sign with the tilde, okay? So that's congruent. We are going to talk about congruent angles. So let's say I have this setup. Okay, if I tell you that this angle is the same measure as this angle, that means they are congruent, right? And the way we mark that they're congruent is exactly the marking that I have for you there in red. Okay, so if you put the same number of arcs, those angles are congruent, which means if these other two angles are congruent, what do you suppose we have to do with our arcs? Just like we did with our hash marks. When there's multiple angles that are congruent, we added another hash mark, right? We're going to add another arc to this. Okay, so 2 arcs, those are congruent. The 1 arcs, those are congruent. Okay, that's how you mark that they are congruent angles. All right, so let's say I told you that this is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. Okay, if I tell you that the measure of angle ABC is 51 degrees. Okay? The measure of angle ABC. Do you all see ABC right now? Okay, ABC would be this angle, right? So ABC is 51 degrees. Based on the markings we know, what's the measure? Actually, no. Tell me the other angle that's 51 degrees. Name it for me. EFG, right? EFG, because they're marked congruent, EFG would also be 51 degrees. Okay? Not angle F, right? Because there's 2 angles at F. We have to name it EFG or GFE. Flip it around. Okay? Okay, so what this does is it brings us to the angle addition postulate. Now, on Friday, we did the segment addition postulate, right? Angle addition postulate says the same thing. The 2 parts added together will equal the whole thing. So if I have an angle that's cut into 2 angles, take those 2 angles, add them together, and they should equal the whole angle by itself. So let me show you a picture here of what the angle addition postulate looks like. Let's say we have this set up. This is L, M, N, and O. Okay. Basically, angle addition is saying the measure of angle LOM plus the measure of angle MON will equal the measure of what? LON. Okay, and just so we're clear, when I put this little M in front of it, that's saying the measure of, that's talking degrees. How many degrees plus how many degrees equals some number of degrees. Okay, so that is angle addition postulate, what it says. We're just going to do an example of how you apply it. Okay, so let's say this is like example 4 in your book, if you like to check it out in the book afterward or you follow along with me. This is what you have. And forgive me if it's not drawn perfectly to scale, because I am not an artist, unfortunately. So this is R. This is Q, this is T, this is S. If they tell us this is 4x minus 20, does that look like 4x minus 20 to you? My numbers are kind of choppy there. And then this one is 3x plus 14. Degrees. This is degrees also. Okay, so let's say they tell us the measure of angle RQT is 155 degrees. It doesn't want to draw a circle for degrees. Sorry. Oh, it looks like an eclipse, guys. That's cute. What are the measure of angle RQS and the measure of angle TQS? Okay, so this is our setup. Much like segment addition postulate, how do we lay it out? How do I set up this problem? You add them together, the two parts that we have, right? So this angle and this angle need to get added together. So 4x minus 20 plus 3x plus 14 should equal what? 155. RQT was RQT. That's the whole thing, right? This is RQT. So that should equal the total. And then from there, you do the algebra. So 4x plus 3x is 7x. Negative 20 plus 14 would be negative 6 or minus 6 equals 155. So we're going to add that 6. And you get 7x equals 161. And then divide by 7. So 161 divided by 7. Anyone got that? It would be 23. Okay, but the question was asking what are the measures of the angles. So now what you need to do is go back up, plug it into our two angle measures. So angle RQS is 4 times 23 minus 20. So simplify that. Angle RQS comes out to 72 degrees. Okay, and then if you do angle TQS, okay, that one we're plugging in here. So 3 times 23 plus 14. Simplify that. TQS comes out to 83 degrees. So you have 72 and 83. That should add up to what? The total, the 155, which in this case it does. So we're good. Okay. Any questions on that? So not a lot of new ideas today. It's really taking segment addition postulate and applying it to angles, which we learned on Friday. And then acute, obtuse, right, straight is stuff that I think you've seen before. Hopefully you've seen before.